Welcome to MSL Stories. Friends, if you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel. I have a dream of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. Let's start the story. It wasn't the first time Jenna had asked for something extravagant, but this time, her persistence was different. For weeks, she'd been eyeing a $950 jacket, some flashy brand she insisted she needed to feel special. I wasn't against treating her, but spending that kind of money on a jacket? My own cost a little over $100, and I considered that more than reasonable. "I've been waiting for this jacket for so long," she said one night, leaning against the kitchen counter, her voice sweetened by that persuasive tone I knew too well. "It's not just some random purchase. It's a little bit of happiness." I wasn't sure why she needed happiness that came with such a hefty price tag, but I was tired of arguing about money. Between our mounting expenses and her constant demands, we were always treading water. "Fine," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "I'll give you the money, just make sure you actually get it, all right?" She smiled, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me with the kind of warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Thank you, babe," she whispered. But then days passed and there was no sign of any jacket. Jenna was still out late, disappearing with vague excuses about work events or catching up with friends. Her phone always seemed to be on silent, flipped over on the table. I didn't think much of it at first, chalking it up to her typical behavior. We were busy people after all, but when she asked me for more money just a week later, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I asked her casually, "What happened to the jacket you wanted so badly?" "Oh," she said a little too quickly. "It was sold out in my size. I'm waiting for it to restock." It was a weak excuse, but I didn't press further. I just watched as she scrolled through her phone, tapping away with an intensity I hadn't seen in a long time. Something was off. The real confirmation came a few days later when I saw an unexpected email notification on my tablet. It was addressed to Jenna. She had logged in once and never bothered to sign out. The subject line read, "Rate your stay at Evergreen Lodge." Evergreen Lodge. That name didn't mean anything to me, but my curiosity was piqued. I opened the email and saw the details. A 3-day rental at a secluded country house booked in Jenna's name. The dates aligned perfectly with one of her so-called work events. I didn't need any more evidence than that. I just sat there staring at the screen, my breath coming in short, angry bursts. I could have confronted her right then, demanded an explanation, maybe even tried to salvage our marriage. But the thought of begging for answers, of pleading with someone who had betrayed me so thoroughly, was revolting. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I decided I'd take everything she thought she had, and I'd do it in a way that would leave no room for sympathy. I didn't confront Jenna that night. There was no point in giving her a chance to cover her tracks or concoct another story. Instead, I kept up the act, playing the part of the clueless husband, while I quietly started digging deeper. I needed to know just how deep her betrayal went, so I began looking for any sign of this Evergreen Lodge affair. I remembered Jenna mentioning her work colleague, a fitness trainer named Dylan, more often than seemed normal over the past few months. At first, I dismissed it as one of her harmless flirtations, but now I knew better. I couldn't be certain he was the other man, but I had a strong feeling. There was always a glint in her eye when she talked about him, a sparkle that I hadn't seen in a long time when she spoke about anything to do with us. A quick check of our shared credit card statements revealed a few more curious charges, several at a high-end gym where Dylan worked. When I cross-referenced the dates, they lined up suspiciously well with the weekends Jenna claimed to be busy with work. I dug further, tracking her phone's location history, which she'd forgotten to turn off, and sure enough, it showed trips to areas far from any work event. By now, the pieces were all coming together, and the picture they formed was crystal clear. My wife was seeing Dylan, and she was using the money I gave her to fund their rendezvous. The final confirmation came when I drove out to Evergreen Lodge myself, just to see it with my own eyes. It was a quaint little place, a charming log cabin surrounded by trees, tucked away far from the city's noise. As I pulled into the gravel parking area, I spotted a familiar car parked discreetly behind a cluster of pine trees. It was Jenna's, and right next to it, a black SUV with a gym bumper sticker. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I sat in my car and waited for about an hour, trying to calm the rage building inside me. Eventually, they emerged. Jenna was wrapped in Dylan's arms, laughing as he kissed her neck. They looked so at ease, so completely unaware that their little secret was no longer secret at all. The anger I felt wasn't just because of the affair itself. It was the audacity, the utter disrespect to parade it so carelessly while using my money to do it. But rather than letting the anger consume me, I channeled it into a plan to make sure they wouldn't walk away from this unscathed. As I drove back home, I thought about the best way to proceed. There would be no screaming matches, no teary-eyed confrontations begging her to come back. There would be no opportunity for explanations or apologies. The only thing left was revenge, methodical, unrelenting revenge. Over the next few days, I played the role of the unsuspecting husband perfectly. I even gave Jenna a kiss on the cheek when she returned, as if I was grateful that she was back from her busy work trip. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, and that was when I knew for sure she wasn't sorry, and she would never be sorry. She felt entitled to it, as if I didn't deserve to know where my money or my wife were going. I started making my preparations quietly, gathering evidence of her affair and moving assets out of our joint accounts. I wasn't about to let her walk away with anything more than what she deserved, and I was going to make sure she paid for every single moment of disrespect. But first, I needed to know more about Dylan. I needed to find the cracks in his life, the places where it would hurt him most. If I was going to destroy them, I was going to do it thoroughly. As I prepared for what came next, I found myself revisiting the past. Our history together flashed through my mind, like a series of faded photographs, some blurred at the edges. Jenna and I had met 8 years ago at a mutual friend's party. I was 24, just starting my career as a software engineer, and she was a fresh-faced marketing graduate with big dreams. We clicked instantly, bonding over shared ambitions and long conversations about our future. Back then, we were a team, and it felt like we could conquer anything together. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. At first, it was subtle. More frequent arguments about trivial matters, disagreements about spending money, complaints about how I worked too much or didn't plan enough getaways. I thought it was just the growing pains of a young marriage. But as time went on, the issues only deepened, and Jenna became increasingly consumed with appearances. Her interest in luxury brands, high-end experiences, and being part of the in-crowd at work took over. It felt like the woman I had married was fading, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who placed more value on image than on the relationship we had built. Jenna had recently become obsessed with fitness, going to the gym 5 days a week and posting about it constantly. Her social media was filled with filtered pictures from expensive fitness retreats, personal training sessions, and a steady stream of praise for her amazing trainer. At first, I thought it was just a new phase, something to keep her occupied. But then, I began to notice that her sessions with Dylan, her trainer, extended well beyond gym hours. Dylan was 28, tall and athletic, the kind of guy who seemed born for Instagram. With his chiseled jawline and a perfectly groomed beard, he was a walking stereotype of the perfect guy, at least on the surface. From what I could find, Dylan had a history of being a bit of a playboy, frequently dating his clients and leaving a trail of broken relationships behind him. He had been fired from a previous gym for inappropriate conduct, but had managed to land on his feet by spinning the situation to his advantage on social media. To his followers, he was the charming and driven self-made man. But the reality was that he thrived on exploiting people's vulnerabilities, particularly women's. It didn't take long to uncover more about his background. There were whispers of illegal side businesses, like selling unlicensed supplements and performing personal training sessions off the books to avoid taxes. I made a list of all the suspicious activities I found and tucked it away. I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to use it yet, but I knew that Dylan had just as much to lose as Jenna did. I spent several days collecting evidence against them, including photos, text messages, and even tracking Jenna's whereabouts through shared location data. I wanted to ensure that when I made my move, it would be definitive. No loose ends, no second chances. I knew Jenna would never expect it. She believed herself to be too clever, too discreet. She had no idea that I was quietly gathering every bit of ammunition I needed. At night, as she lay beside me, blissfully unaware of what I knew, I would imagine all the ways I could take them down. It was no longer just about getting back at Jenna for the betrayal. It was about the principle, about teaching them both that actions have consequences, especially when you trample on someone who trusted you. The plan was evolving, taking shape in my mind with each passing day. I had the means, and I had the motivation. Now, all I needed was the right timing to ensure that their world would come crumbling down when they least expected it. There would be no warnings, no dramatic confrontations. When it happened, it would be swift, and it would be devastating. For now, I kept playing my part, the patient husband, none the wiser. It wasn't easy, but the thought of what lay ahead made it bearable. As far as Jenna knew, I was just another oblivious man, still living in the past, blind to the reality around him. But I wasn't blind. I saw everything, and soon they would too. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my revenge had to be executed in stages. If I hit them all at once, it would be over too quickly, like ripping off a bandage. No, I wanted this to be slow and deliberate, something they would feel unraveling around them piece by piece. The first step was to protect myself and make sure Jenna wouldn't walk away with any more than she deserved. I contacted a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings in secret. She came highly recommended for her expertise in protecting assets during contentious splits, and we worked together to move my finances into a secure account that Jenna couldn't access. It wasn't technically illegal since I wasn't hiding anything that belonged to her. I was simply making sure she couldn't drain our joint accounts once the divorce papers were filed. I also documented everything, from her affair to the misuse of our funds. The lawyer assured me that I had more than enough evidence to make sure Jenna wouldn't see a penny of alimony. The next step was to gather even more evidence against her, specifically anything that could be used to show that her affair had impacted our finances. I went back through months of transactions, identifying every questionable purchase and recording the details. There was the country house rental, of course, but there were also suspiciously high charges at expensive restaurants, boutique hotels, and even a jewelry store. She hadn't bought any jewelry for herself that I knew of, which left only one explanation. She was using my money to fund their little love affair. While I prepared the financial aspect, I started thinking about how to tarnish her reputation. Jenna prided herself on her image. Her job in marketing was all about crafting a perfect brand, and she made sure to do the same with her own life. She had recently been angling for a promotion at work, one that would come with a nice salary bump and more authority. I knew that if I could make her appear unreliable, or worse, ethically compromised, it would crush her chances of getting that promotion. I reached out to one of her coworkers anonymously, using a burner email to drop hints about Jenna's questionable expenses that could be related to company funds. I suggested that some of her recent travels might not have been entirely work-related. I didn't give away too much, just enough to sow a seed of doubt. The coworker was a notorious gossip, so I knew it would spread through the office like wildfire. While that was in motion, I moved on to phase 2, Dylan. I had no plans to let him walk away from this unscathed. Jenna was only part of the problem. Dylan was the type who thought he could do whatever he wanted without consequence, and I intended to show him otherwise. I started by gathering everything I could find about his side hustles. There were plenty of rumors about him selling unapproved supplements at the gym and offering under-the-table training sessions for cash. I created a dossier filled with as much information as I could collect, including screenshots of social media posts where he casually hinted at special deals for his most loyal clients. It wasn't hard to find people who would confirm these rumors, especially when they thought they were just sharing gym gossip. The next move was to hit him professionally. I used an anonymous tip line to report his illegal activities to the gym's management, attaching my dossier as evidence. I made sure to mention the previous gym he'd been fired from, suggesting they reach out to his former employers. The gym had a strict policy against any kind of illicit activity, so I knew that if the information got back to them, it would trigger an internal investigation. And if that didn't get him fired, it would at least make his life very uncomfortable for a while. Once the ball was rolling, I turned my attention back to Jenna. It was time to set things in motion and make sure she would be caught completely off guard. I prepared the divorce papers, instructing my lawyer to serve them to Jenna at her office, where the impact would be public and undeniable. I wanted her to feel humiliated, to have to explain to her coworkers why her husband had filed for divorce in the middle of the day. But before that moment arrived, I still had one last thing to prepare: the financial blow. I waited for the right day, when Jenna would be at work and distracted, then quietly transferred the remaining funds from our joint accounts into my secure personal account. I left just enough money to keep up the appearance of normalcy. It wasn't theft. I was simply reclaiming what was mine. The groundwork was laid and the trap was set. All that was left was to wait for the right moment to pull the trigger. It wouldn't be long now. The last bit of Jenna's fantasy was about to shatter, and Dylan was going to feel it too. They both thought they could play me for a fool. What they didn't realize was that I had been playing them all along. The moment had finally arrived, Everything was in place and I was ready to set the plan into motion. I knew that timing was crucial. I wanted the impact to be felt simultaneously, hitting Jenna and Dylan from all directions so that there would be no way for them to recover or regroup. I'd thought of every detail and prepared for every possible outcome. Phase 1, the financial hit. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday morning. Jenna was at work in the middle of a team meeting when the process server walked in and handed her the envelope. She looked confused at first, then quickly turned pale as she scanned the documents. I could only imagine the questions running through her head. How could I know? What had I found out? That same morning, I visited the bank to ensure the transfers went through smoothly. The funds from our joint accounts had been moved, leaving Jenna with barely anything. As soon as I confirmed the transfers, I canceled our shared credit cards, sending notifications to her email and phone. She would know instantly that her access to money had been cut off. No more shopping sprees, no more expensive lunches, and certainly no more romantic getaways funded by my hard-earned money. By the time Jenna finished reading the divorce papers, she would be coming to terms with the financial reality that awaited her. The evidence I had provided was overwhelming. Clear proof of her infidelity and misuse of our marital assets. The lawyer assured me that she would have little to no claim on anything significant. Phase 2, public exposure. While Jenna was still processing the shock, the rumors I had set in motion at her workplace were beginning to surface. The gossip about her questionable expenses had reached the ears of her supervisor. I had timed everything perfectly, with the divorce papers arriving just as the office buzz reached its peak. She was pulled into a private meeting with HR shortly after being served the papers. From what I later heard through my own contacts, she was confronted about her frequent absences, sudden weekend trips, and whether any company funds had been used improperly. Jenna was good at talking her way out of most situations, but there was enough suspicion to put her promotion on indefinite hold. To add salt to the wound, I had prepared a series of anonymous social media posts, hinting at the affair and linking Jenna to Dylan without directly naming them. The posts went live just after lunchtime, and within hours, mutual friends and acquaintances were already starting to piece things together. The comments section became a feeding ground for speculation, with people from our social circles chiming in and sharing their own suspicions. Phase 3, direct confrontation. Later that evening, I waited for Jenna to come home. I knew she would have no choice but to face me after everything that had happened that day. When she walked through the door, her face was a mixture of rage and desperation. "What the hell is this, Alex?" she yelled, waving the divorce papers in her hand. "You served me at work? You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I know about Dylan. I know where my money went. I know everything, Jenna." For a moment, she was stunned into silence. Then she launched into a series of excuses, claiming that it was just a mistake, that she had been confused, and that we could work things out. I didn't flinch. I just watched as her facade crumbled as she cycled through anger, tears, and pleading. "There's nothing left to work out," I said quietly. "You made your choice, and now you're going to live with the consequences." As she realized that there was no salvaging the situation, her expression shifted to defiance. "You think you can just ruin my life like this?" she spat, her voice venomous. "You're not going to get away with—" "I already have," I cut in sharply. "And if I were you, I'd stop worrying about me and start worrying about your perfect trainer." Dylan's downfall. While Jenna was still absorbing my words, the gym management was having a conversation with Dylan. The tip-off I had sent a few weeks ago had led to an investigation. The evidence I provided, combined with several complaints from clients who didn't appreciate the way he conducted business, had been enough to get him suspended pending further review. By the end of the week, he was officially fired. His gym membership was revoked, and word spread quickly among his clients. I made sure to send him a little gift, too, an envelope with a single note inside. "Looks like you're out of work. Hope it was worth it." I didn't stop there. I had also reported his side hustles to the local tax authorities, detailing his off-the-books cash deals. I knew that would catch up with him soon enough. The law had a way of making life difficult when someone started poking around, and I had given them plenty of reason to investigate. The final touch was a small but meaningful gesture. I drove out to the now-closed Evergreen Lodge and left a framed photo of Jenna and Dylan, which I had printed from one of their social media posts, on the doorstep. The message underneath read, "Thanks for the memories." The weeks that followed felt like a strange sort of rebirth. I wasn't naive enough to think that revenge would fix everything, but it brought closure. Jenna moved out of the house and stayed with a friend, She tried reaching out a few times, apologizing, promising to make things right, but I ignored her. There was nothing she could say that would erase what she had done, and I wasn't interested in dragging things out any longer. I sold the house not long after, using the proceeds to start fresh. I didn't go on some cliched quest to find myself. I knew who I was. I just needed to live my life on my own terms again, free from the deceit that had poisoned my marriage. Dylan eventually faded from view, his name rarely coming up in conversation. His charm had a way of attracting trouble, and from what I heard, he had a few more issues to deal with than just being jobless. As for Jenna, she stayed in the same city, but I moved away, putting enough distance between us to ensure I would never have to cross paths with her again. I heard from mutual friends that she was struggling, trying to rebuild her life, but it wasn't my concern. She had made her choices, and she was living with the results. In the end, I didn't feel triumph or pride, just relief. Revenge wasn't about winning or losing. It was about justice, about making sure they both paid a price for treating me like a fool. And I was done. Thank you, friends.